Hello again, everyone. This is Bill Owen with our podcast. And we're going to break away from what we've been doing. We've been concentrating on a lot of nostalgic things like comic strips and movies of the past, early television, radio programs, The Shadow and the Lone Ranger, Jack Benny, Amos and Andy. We're going a little highbrow today, talk about the great philosophers of the world. Most of us have heard names like Rousseau and John Stuart Mill and Jean-Paul Sartre and René Descartes and so on. But to most of us, me included, they're just names without really knowing, going behind the scenes and finding out what the philosophies were, who these men were. They were seemingly exclusively men. You can't think of any leading philosophers, certainly of ancient times. So I thought we'd just find out something about these people. And the first name that comes to my mind when I think of philosophers is René Descartes, the great French mathematician and scientist. And his work certainly has impressed me, I think particularly when he proved the existence of God in mere words. Now, how did he do that? Well, he simply posited that if you can imagine something, it must exist in reality. In other words, if you imagine an arc, a circle, a straight line, any kind of a polygon, it must exist. You can't just make up something like that. And since men and women, of course, tend to think of God, they can imagine that there is a God of the universe. God, according to Descartesian philosophy, Cartesian philosophy, they usually say, must exist. He was one that came up with the famous cogito ergo sum, which means I think, therefore I am. He's considered the very first of all the modern philosophers. And the many things that he used to. He was from France, of course. He spent 20 years of his nearly 54 years on this planet in the Dutch Republic, so he's quite revered over there as well. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. He also is famous for a line, the reading of all good books is like a conversation with the best minds of past centuries. That's rather profound, you think about it. René Descartes. Then there's the famous Danish theologian Søren Kierkegaard. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. I'm sure you've heard that somewhere along the way. He was the Danish philosopher of the 1800s. What else did he come out with? Once you label me, you negate me. These are deep thoughts. You just don't skim over them. Think about them. Once you label me, you negate me. That's Søren Kierkegaard. How about St. Thomas Aquinas, way back in the 1200s, the Italian philosopher? The things that we love tell us who we are. And to one who has faith, no explanation is necessary. To one without faith, no explanation is possible. That's one of my favorite quotations. Let's hear it again. To one who has faith, no explanation is necessary. To one without faith, no explanation is possible. One of the most interesting is the German from the period of 1724 to 1804, Immanuel Kant. He was born in Königsberg, East Prussia. Why do I say so interesting? Well, you've always heard that travel broadens the mind. This brilliant philosopher never traveled more than 10 miles from his birthplace of Königsberg, East Prussia. That's rather amazing. John Stuart Mill, of course, England had to have a part in philosophy of the ages, English economist from the 1800s. Very, very well-educated man, considered a radical at his time. And John Stuart Mill had influence on so many other people down through the ages. John Stuart Mill. And here's, you might say a Frenchman, but he's really a Swiss from Geneva. Jean-Jacques Rousseau from the 1700s. Oh, what a versatile man. He composed an opera, both the words and the music. Most famous, I suppose, for writing the treatise on education called Émile. He believed in a true democracy as opposed to what we have, a representative democracy. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Another philosopher's name comes to mind, Arthur Schopenhauer, an atheistic philosopher, German. He once said, all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. And third, it is accepted as being self-evident. Arthur Schopenhauer. Oh, there's Jean-Paul Sartre, 20th century writer and philosopher, who once said, if you are lonely when you are alone, you are in bad company. Sartre, oh, he's had tremendous effect on other writers and philosophers over the centuries. He was a great promoter of what they call existentialism, a word that's thrown around quite easily today, which merely focuses on human existence. Existentialism, one of the founders of that school of philosophy, Jean-Paul Sartre. Oh, we can't overlook the Scottish historian and economist David Hume. He believed that all human knowledge derives from experience. Think about that. All human knowledge derives from experience. He was known as a skeptic among philosophers, David Hume of Scotland. And then there's another German, Georg Hegel. There's a famous line from him. We learn from history that we do not learn from history. Oh, how much truth is packed into that pithy saying. And nothing great in this world has ever been accomplished without passion. Oh, that is so true. Nothing in this world has ever been accomplished without passion. I think of my favorite words and least favorite words. I think my least favorite word that I can think of off the top of my head is boring. People say, it's boring. How can anything in life be boring? There's so much beauty, so much to think about, so much to contemplate, to admire. Just lying on the grass on a summer afternoon looking up at the clouds passing by. How can anyone be bored? And my favorite word of all, very favorite word, is enthusiasm. I just love to see people who are enthusiastic about something. I don't care whether it's their children, their relatives, their sport, their passion for their job or their automobile. It's wonderful to see people that are not jaded but enthusiastic. Well, there are a lot of other philosophical names come to mind. Spinoza, Hobbes, John Locke, Nietzsche, Leibniz, Santayana. My favorite of all remains René Descartes, the great Frenchman. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Well, we've been thinking about philosophers for the past few minutes, and our series of podcasts won't be probably quite as profound in the future. We'll talk about the pop singers, male and female, college football stars, baseball heroes, and old-time radio we talk about quite a bit, Hollywood movies, movie actors and actresses, actors like Clark Gable, Cary Grant, Spencer Tracy, Edward G. Robinson, actresses like Katharine Hepburn, Bette Davis, Claudette Colbert, Louise Reiner, Greer Garson, Vivian Leigh. There's a lot to talk about in this world of ours, and we do that from time to time on our podcasts. This is Bill Owen signing off for now.